You are listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundram, and with my co-host,
Ashley Case.
We will be sitting down with our industry veterans to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry.
Today's guest is AJ Patel. AJ has more than 35 years of consulting, business development, operations, program management, and systems engineering experience. Currently, as president and CEO, AJ leads SMA Inc., the world's largest advisory firm, dedicated to improving public sector clients' competitiveness across program life cycles, from market and competitive strategy to capture strategy, bid and proposal development, all the way through to profitable program execution. He also supports advisory teams focusing on competitive strategy, policy, technology, and investment decisions for senior executives in industry and governments in the US, Europe, Middle East, and Asia. Prior to joining SMA in 2013, AJ held various business development roles with Deloitte, Monitor Group, SMA, and TRW. AJ is a strong leader and a professional with a Master's of Business Administration in Strategy and Finance from the University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business, and a bachelor's degree in physics from the Johns Hopkins University. In his free time, AJ enjoys traveling and is an avid reader. He has a particular fascination with typography, and the latest fun addition to his library is Simon Garfield's book, Just My Type, a book about fonts. His favorite bookstore on the planet is Dont Books in London. Welcome, AJ, to Scribble Talk. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Ashley, and that was very kind of you. It's a pleasure to be with you and your listeners.
Oh, thanks so much. So AJ, we're curious to learn about kind of where you're from, where you grew up, and where you got your education.
Okay. I guess we're starting at the beginning, aren't we?
Yep.
Okay. So I was born in the United States in the state of Pennsylvania, in the capital city of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. A lot of people don't know that. Just led a normal childhood life there in the suburbs of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I went to a small rural high school there in Pennsylvania. And after that, I actually kind of didn't finish my senior year in high school. Just decided to go off to college on my own. I got admitted. And a funny story, about a year later, I had to go back to the high school to convince them to give me my high school degree. And I sat in the audience of my own high school graduation. They wouldn't let me walk. So I received my bachelor's degree in physics from the Johns Hopkins University. Eventually, then I also received a master's in business administration at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow. So is that what got you over to the West Coast? Is that degree?
Well, I have to say, so I was born in the East Coast. I was a solid East Coaster. I was living in, I think I was just finishing up my degree at Johns Hopkins. I was living in Baltimore, which is a wonderful city. It's become an incredible city, but kind of got tired of the weather. And I just couldn't believe it. I sent out random resumes as I was graduating to a bunch of companies. And somehow my resume got picked up by an incredible individual at TRW. And called me up and said, I'd like to come out to Los Angeles for an interview. And I just thought to myself, wow, I've never been to Los Angeles. It'd be a great thing to go do, which I did. And then a few weeks later, I got a job offer. And I thought, wow, okay, someone's going to actually pay me to live on the beach in Southern California. That was too attractive of an offer for me to pass up on.
Absolutely. And so was that first job straight into proposals and business development, or did you enter the field in some other profession?
Yeah, not really. And I think it's almost like almost everyone else in our profession, at least in the aerospace and defense industry side of it. I started out as a systems engineer. I was working on intercontinental ballistic missiles, satellite systems, all sorts of interesting things in aerospace and defense. And then ultimately, like many others, you get asked, somebody volunteers you, frankly, on a proposal. And I immediately got hooked. I loved the adrenaline. I loved, frankly, I loved the fact it was like a non-linear thing. It was a journey. There was just a lot of excitement. As you know, proposals are full of all different types of excitement. And I just love that. I actually thrived in that environment. I guess I eventually became pretty good, so I kept on getting asked to join proposal efforts. I ultimately became known at TRW in terms of helping with pricing strategy and helping them craft the cost volumes as well as other parts of the proposal. And
Oh,
then
wow.
that then kind of led to supporting capture teams and business development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the years, I'm sure you've observed some really interesting trends in the way that we do business. Do you think that there are ways that we used to approach capture and proposal in the past that are perhaps better than how we do business today?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's several I like to point out for your listeners. I think, and this may not be a universal observation. It's just something which I've observed, particularly in the last 5 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of proposal teams today that I've observed and have participated in, they've become disconnected from the strategy and the content, almost like a living dynamic thing. We have to remember that winning new business, including the proposal preparation phase of that, it's a journey of discovery. So I think we may have lost that touch because sometimes I feel that we've become too much of a slave to the process.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly as the quest for best practices drove us to maturity on the mechanical aspects of proposal preparation, we've almost lost touch with the aspect of proposals, which is the journey part of it. It's you really don't know very much at the beginning, and things become revealed to you during the course of the capture and proposal, and you have to adapt your strategy. And it's today proposals not only have to be based on an incredible, compelling strategy, but it also has to articulate that strategy in a compelling and persuasive way. So you have to hit on both points in order to really win these days. I remember a time back in the 90s, there were proposals that were based on just an absolutely beautifully articulated offering, but the strategy was poor, believe it or not. And it's because the reader really understood what was being offered, right? In spite of the fact that perhaps it wasn't the best offer that was available to them. There's a second thing, which I think is, in fact, perhaps more important than what I just mentioned. And it's hard for me to put a finger on, but I don't see kind of the same level of relentless quest to win on all dimensions as perhaps there used to be back in the 90s. So I'm going pretty far back at least in aerospace and defense industry. What I mean by that is winning is really the result of creating a clear differentiation in your offer. In the past, there seemed to be more of a competitive mandate to create that differentiation between you and the next best offer by widening the gap as much as you could on every dimension. And there's been a lot of competitions in the last over a decade, where the offers look very similar to the customer, and it was a difficult choice for them to make. And in my view, I think back in the 90s we were just more relentless, and perhaps more of a mandate of a competitive spirit in companies to create that true differentiation in the offering. I think part of it, and this doing that really forces companies to make really hard decisions essentially about their resources, how they do business, where they do business, pricing strategy, who's going to run the program when they win, things like that. Mm-hmm. I think part of this is the maturation of the industries that we all serve, also where the company cultures have also somewhat become more consensus-based and risk-averse. And I think part of that has led to a bit of a dilution in what I call that competitive spirit that I used to see much more prevalent in at least the early 1990s.
So on a similar vein, do you think that there are any current best practices that you think should be modified or changed?
Yeah, I do. Perhaps the most predominant one is that I think there's been a misunderstanding on the use of graphics, and that's led to the overuse of figures and tables and proposals. Many times I have the opportunity to participate in red team reviews and reviews of proposals all the time. I see figures and tables and proposals that are just either they're devoid of really meaningful information, some of them suffer from too much information, and thus the message gets lost, or simply they're like not at all illustrating the text, so they're totally independent of the text. The figures and graphics and proposals are really meant to illustrate the text. I think part of this is we've lost touch, and this is really a hard topic, particularly in technical fields where you have a lot of engineers. We've lost touch with the importance of narrative. I think in many circumstances, narrative, this is the text that we write in proposals. Mm-hmm. It's really the only way you can convey the nuance or complexity of a topic and take the reader from point A to point B, right? I think, kind of related to this is that in the narratives that I have reviewed in many proposal efforts, we lose the fact that what I call the burden of reasoning is really on the writer and not the reader. So, evaluators, they typically already have another day job, right? And they're definitely already jaded, right, by reading everyone's sales promises. So they, you have to really understand that. And so we don't want to put them in a position of guessing what we meant by what we wrote, right? Or even the graphics, right? And so we don't, and also we don't want to bore them. And so the narrative's got to be really memorable, but most importantly, the burden of reasoning is on the writer, not on the reader. And so there's a lot of times when we kind of write very factually about things in proposals, but we really don't write it from the perspective of thinking about what the reader's journey is from point A to point B. So it's like telling a story, right? Mm-hmm.
So essentially, are you saying it's the burden of the writer to really draw those conclusions for the evaluator, so that they're not guessing in what you're getting at just by presenting facts?
Absolutely. And it's not just presenting the conclusions as a claim, but actually helping the reader understand what the logic was, right? In terms of how you got from that conclusion from the beginning, from point A to point B.
So it sounds like you've worked on a bunch of different cool projects over the years. Are there any that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's been some interesting experiences for sure, proposals and other projects. Wow, this was at SMA back in the early mid-90s.
Wow.
We had, I'm going pretty far back, but it's an interesting story. We received a call. And those were the days when you just get calls out of the blue for whatever reason, and we were happy to take them. And it seemed from a very legitimate business. It was through actually a referral from a referral, and it was actually from an emissary of Gorbachev.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And so we were to meet this prospective clients at a restaurant in New Jersey. Well, a couple of us flew to New Jersey, and the scene was straight out of The Sopranos. Do you know that HBO series, The Sopranos?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think everybody in the world does, right?
Yeah.
So we were to meet at an Italian restaurant, right? And they all came in armored SUVs and bodyguards, and they were carrying, if you know what I mean.
Wow.
And they were going after some public sector. We basically, we made it a very quick dinner and very, very politely declined the offer. We've had a number of experiences like that. On a more serious side, I have to say, and this is basically iconic for our firm SMA, so the F-35 aircraft started out as the Joint Strike Fighter competition, was done in a down select, so it was 2 phases. And so that was probably one of the most memorable projects for myself personally, as well as for many folks at SMA. It was just an incredible capture and proposal effort where we truly became a partner to Lockheed Martin, helping them win that. Another was another kind of old competition. It was the TDRS HIJ, so it was satellites H, I, and J. TDRS is a data relay satellite for NASA with a few other missions on that. But it was a really interesting upset over the incumbent. I think the most interesting proposals and capture efforts we supported are were those where we helped the client really beat a longstanding incumbent. And all the things that go along with that. We were also involved in a number of really interesting program support. So we also help companies once they've won the program. The THAAD missile program at Lockheed Martin is kind of the program that many folks tried to kill many times. And the program had, it was a lot of the programs we do in aerospace and defense are really state of the art. They're really pushing technology and other aspects. And so, programs are going to have failures. They're going to have challenges. And it was just an incredible effort to help Lockheed Martin in terms of keeping that program alive through successive phases of that program. We also had some really kind of interesting projects when I was at the Monitor Group. We had lots of interesting projects ranging from helping Saudi Arabia with develop their national economic cities. I was personally involved in helping them develop their national city around defense capabilities, to things like working for Bellator. I don't know if your listeners know who Bellator is. It's the mixed martial arts company based in Los Angeles, and it was surreal because the talent actually participated in our meetings at Bellator. So we got to know a bunch of mixed martial arts fighters that were actually kind of stars.
Wow. That journey that got you interested in the higher leadership aspects of running a business, and can you tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to become the CEO of SMA?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So I'll just say as a side point, I probably at some point realized I wasn't that great of an engineer, so I needed to go figure out something else that I was good at. So for me, it was mostly a random walk. The most recent opportunity here to lead SMA really arose from a set of very unique circumstances. So I'll try to outline that journey for your listeners. So it really started with becoming, as we talked about earlier, good at proposals and really enjoying that aspect of what I did at TRW. I left TRW and ended up leading business development for an environmental engineering firm. And this was in the early 1990s. And my wife and I were living in Southern California, and I was commuting up to Oakland, California. So I saw the same faces every Monday morning and every Friday evening on the Alaska Airlines flight from Orange County from Oakland. It was a period of time when I all of a sudden realized that a lot of other people were kind of doing the same thing. So at that time, my wife was completing her PhD in business at the Peter F. Drucker School at Claremont. And one of her colleagues had become friends with this individual, Steve Myers. Ultimately, that friend suggested I meet with Steve. He knew that I was getting bored, not bored, but I was getting really tired of doing that commute, right? And so he suggested I meet with Steve. And within a month, I was working at SMA and really enjoying a 10-minute drive to work, let me tell you.
Absolutely.
So like many others at SMA, I had many jobs. I ran operations for a while. I led business development. A lot of folks at SMA just kind of ended up having a lot of jobs at the firm. But after we went public, I led the heritage proposal business for Steve.
Oh, wow.
And then I had a really unique opportunity to join the Monitor Group. And that was the Monitor Group, for your listeners, was founded by Michael Porter and 4 others from the Harvard Business School. Monitor's a global strategy firm, kind of in the same ilk as McKinsey, BCG, Bain. But we were the boutique version of that. And this was, going to Monitor was a really pivotal event for me in my career, and it was entirely serendipity. And so this is kind of where a lot of the random walk comes into play. I was meeting with Joe Fuller, one of the founders of the Monitor Group, to discuss industrial base strategy on the Joint Strike Fighter competition, and it turned out that they did their research. They had read my wife's PhD dissertation, of all things. So they knew her thesis advisors, Robin Cooper, James Womack, Richard Devaney, and others who were well-known academicians at that time in strategy. So eventually in 2001, Monitor asked me to come on board to lead a national security practice there. This was just around the time of 9/11. Monitor had actually lost a few individuals on 911, and wanted to create a national security practice as essentially as a way to kind of find ways where it could give back to the nation. And so I went to Monitor. Enjoyed an incredible 13 years there of just fascinating work around the world. Eventually, in January of 2013, Deloitte acquired Monitor, and I became a director at Deloitte. Frankly, I was just all ready to kind of think through the last stage of my career. Deloitte's an incredible company, one of the world's largest professional services firms. Maybe about 250,000 people worldwide, right? Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how firms that big can actually continue to operate and grow. So and what happened was I was a director ready to finish my career, and then in the intervening years back at SMA in 2000, so we went public in '98, and then in 2008, the leadership of the company at that point took itself private. Mm-hmm. And so I received a phone call just a month or so after being at Deloitte. I received a phone call from Calteus. It's an LA private equity firm that was a long-term investor in SMA during different parts of the company's history. And they were just looking for some advice on SMA. And turns out after a lot of conversations and meetings and thinking, we basically convinced ourselves a few months later to make an offer to buy the company. So July 2013, I returned to SMA as its CEO. So that's the story of circularity for me.
So I'm sure that you saw the organization from when you started originally and then now through 2020, the organization has evolved and changed. What are some of the things that you observed in those changes?
Yeah, so I think in a lot of ways we're a very different firm today, but also in some very fundamental ways, we're the same. I think when I came back to SMA 13 years later, there were just incredible people again, which it was always a thing which made SMA special for me was just the people there. And also just the fact that it somehow just had the right recipe in helping clients win and perform on programs. Somehow that recipe just wasn't something that the firm, the leadership of the firm throughout its years could kind of figure out how to replicate for itself. That was kind of really my fascination for coming back to SMA. But I observed a number of things when I came back. One was, having been gone for 13 years, I had seen a lot of changes in the work I did when I was at the Monitor Group with companies in aerospace and defense, companies in IT, professional services, just other federal contractors, and also with the customers, the federal agencies. When I came back, I was kind of a little shocked that the firm and also our competitors all basically operated exactly the same way we had operated when I had left SMA back in 2001. And to me, that was just a little strange. At that time and second half of 2013, I really just couldn't put my finger on it. But over time, we kind of, after spending a lot of time actually talking to our clients, we begun to really understand what our clients' true needs were in terms of what they were really looking for from firms like us. So a little bit after 2013, about 2015, we really started a fundamental transformation of the company. Rather than kind of taking you through that whole journey, today we operate and engage with clients and our associates with what I say the convenience and transparency and the speed of, now this may seem strange to your listeners, but the speed of digital apps that today have become essentially a part of our social fabric. And so clients have always trusted us, when they hire us, that we're going to bring a level of impact that improves their competitiveness or helps them execute on programs. Our relationships with our clients and the relationships that our clients have with our associates, they're lifelong. The vast majority of our business is repeat business. It could be a client that we had 3 or 4 years earlier, but it's really about developing those long-term relationships. And so what the clients told us was that, and I think it was the same for almost every one of our competitors, if not all of them, that as a firm, this is called our boutique industry, kind of failed to evolve as the clients themselves, their cultures evolved, technologies evolved, and their customers and federal agencies or public sector customers worldwide also have evolved. And so we still did things the old school way. In terms of how we engaged with clients, in terms of how we thought of our employees and associates, and how we made internal decisions. And so we realized that this was an opportunity for us. So we spent a lot of time talking to clients with our own associates, and just a lot of kind of soul searching amongst ourselves. And we kind of made a little bit of a leap of faith. We said, well, what if we could operate still with that same level of impact as a professional services firm, but operated kind of differently culturally and technology-wise, in the sense of, what if we became transparent and inclusive, and through that also became much quicker in terms of meeting the needs of our clients and our associates. And we ultimately basically decided that what we needed to do was to operate the firm off of a digital platform, which we ended up creating ourselves. So this is the platform which we call TOD, or Talent on Demand. But it's so, I think the easiest way to explain it is that we like to think of ourselves as the combination of Uber and eHarmony in professional services. So we're probably, I think, so we like to, it's about transparency and speed, right? And inclusiveness, those things. So today we operate with incredible transparency with our clients and our associates. I don't know of any other professional services firm that actually publicizes every project opportunity to its employee base, right? We do that, and details about it. And so our employees have the opportunity to basically raise their hand and say, hey, I'd like to be considered for that because this could be a good next step in my career, as an example. We're very transparent with our clients about our people's experience, the actual granular experience that they've had and impact they've had on other projects, and pricing. So it's been an incredible response from both our employees and from clients in terms of these changes we've made. I think we're probably, and the other aspect of us, which we're more and more strengthening, when we can, is we're probably the largest professional services firm in the public sector that can actually pull that thread from helping a client understand their markets, building new capabilities to address those markets, helping them compete and win, which is kind of, where the firm was founded, and then also, performing on those contracts. So it's a bit of a unique thing for us, where we can provide a consistency of support, methodology, people across that entire life cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like, as a CEO of such a large, successful business, I'm sure you have a lot on your shoulders. What are some of the things that you like best, and some of the things that you like least with that sort of role and responsibility?
Yeah. There's always something you love and something which you don't like, right? About any job.
Absolutely.
So I guess I really enjoy working with clients to understand their needs and helping them. It's probably my greatest joy in the job I have. I think the other joy is I've always enjoyed kind of the professional relationships you develop with each other, and the diversity of talents. So, we have some incredible people. I've been really fortunate to have worked at a company like SMA, as well as at Modern, where it was really more, I don't know how to say, and I don't want to use the word lifestyle company, but it's really about people. It's almost like it's an association or network of really interesting people who have chosen to organize themselves and operate as a business. So I think it's really those two aspects which I've really have enjoyed. And it's unique because, particularly at SMA, because everyone's here by choice. And as you and your listeners know, at least on the bid and proposal side of the world, right? It's, as well as the program side, but it's a difficult and grueling job. Just to think about having an entire career that's comprised of proposal after proposal, for example, right? It's very grueling. And so I think it's, summarized in terms of what I really enjoy about what I do, it's about the enjoyment of helping clients and just simply working with others at SMA. Okay, so what do I not like? Oh, it's hard to pinpoint a single thing. Um, I guess it's you never really kind of like when things don't quite go the way they plan, right? And which is
Mhm.
really it's prevalent in our world. And so I think over the last 35 years, I've become more and more tolerant of realizing and understanding that, and actually, frankly, kind of almost relishing those opportunities, those things as an opportunity. When things go wrong, well, you got to really fix them and make them into a positive opportunity instead of a negative opportunity. Um, Besides that, I still enjoy a short commute, but I do travel a lot. I, I still have that 5 mile commute, but I'm probably traveling, 4 out of 5 days a week.
Yeah, that can get grueling, can it?
Yeah, and at some point you just kind of become immune to it, if you know what I mean. It's just
Mhm.
part of your life, right?
Yeah.
And in this period of isolation, I actually kind of miss it.
So you've held a variety of leadership positions over the years. What are some of the qualities that you believe make a good leader?
Good leaders have to understand and develop their own leadership style. So,
Mhm.
there isn't one style that's right or wrong. There's a lot of organizational development and business books about leadership.
Mhm.
And I think, in my experience, at least, the most important thing is to realize that everyone has their own style. And you have to really understand what that is and what the strengths and weaknesses of that style is, so that you don't necessarily have to realize your success shouldn't rely on those things which are weaknesses in your leadership style, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's the first thing that's really important. I think I'll go to this phrase which I use a lot. It's called the phrase is tolerance for ambiguity. I think particularly particularly in the world we live in now,
Mhm.
you to be a good leader, you really have to have a high tolerance for ambiguity. Very few things are known. There's a lot of things which are changing in our industry, in life and world in the world writ large, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so you really have to have kind of that tolerance for ambiguity. Not everything in terms of things start create a plan, but then just expect that plan to change, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And and you can't expect to ever make the perfect decision. So it's really, the way I like to think of it is, and some of the folks who work for me may disagree with me on this, but because maybe I'm not as timely in terms of decision making as they would like it to be. But I think timeliness in decision making is much more important than having a near 100% confidence that you're making the right decision. You need to be informed, but at some point there's diminishing returns on getting more and more informed in order to make a decision, and you just got to kind of call the ball. But once you made that decision, you got to be ready and willing to change that decision as well. I think those are really the two things which I would say are qualities which make a good leader. Well, let me add a third thing. Okay, to be a good leader, you need to have people who are willing to follow you.
Yeah.
So I mean that's like almost the most important thing. I remember one of the senior individuals at the Monitor Group, as we were having conversations about who to promote to partnership level, and that was actually one of the most critical questions we asked about people is, well, is there a cadre of individuals that actually have demonstrated that they want to follow this individual? And if the answer to that was yes, then that individual should clearly be considered as for promotion to be a partner in the firm.
Mm. We're dealing with some new business challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways you're helping your team to adjust during this challenging time?
One of the things that we definitely needed to do first, before I talk about the fun things, was we needed to find a way to replicate the aspect of being physically together, right? And this
Mhm.
is something which I've always worked with remote teams for a long time, ever since my version 1.0 at SMA, right? And
Mhm.
there's this thing which I kind of developed called the "Hey You" factor. When you're in an office or a proposal room or some office environment, right? It's just amazing how if you just say, "Hey you," like, "Hey Mary, do you have 2 seconds?" And Mary could be sitting 20 desks away, but somehow she'll pick it up, right? And it's just you have that immediate, instantaneous ability to interact and actually address an issue right there and then in real time. And I think as we all begin to learn how to live in this virtual digital world, we lose that hey you factor somehow. So, and it's funny. I mean, even that hey you factor in an office is so much more effective than, picking up the phone and dialing Mary, for example, right? Or even texting, right? As simple as picking up the phone and calling somebody and texting it really is a pretty high barrier compared to hey you. So we've actually have tried a number of things to replicate that hey you environment amongst our staff. From 7, for example, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We've created this virtual hey you room. We use Microsoft Teams that everyone just logs into, and you put your speakers at about 20%. You mute your microphone, but if you want to say hey Mary, do you got a second? You unmute. Quickly say, hey, Mary, do you have a second? Mary can kind of hear it out of her 20% volume speakers and respond, right? And while that might seem intrusive to others, it actually hasn't been that bad, and it's helped us stay connected with knowing what each other is kind of doing, which is kind of the biggest benefit of being in an office, particularly one where you don't have physical offices. We're in an open space environment at SMA. So we do that. We do the twice daily check-ins, all of those things. We also hold open office hours of our associates where they can drop in onto this virtual hey you room. And we make it a little bit fun by having a theme for each one of these check-ins. I think yesterday's theme was, what did you watch on TV the previous night? Today's theme is, what did you have for dinner last night? And so we kind of do fun things with that. We also start to do weekly town halls with all of our associates. So, we have well over 500 folks in the business. And so, and it's funny, in the past, those seemed really difficult to pull off. A lot of energy was put into it. There was, a lot of kind of concerns about, well, how will people react? Will people say things which may not be politically correct? All those things which used to kind of get you all tied up in knots that you would worry about when you hold town halls. And I'm just being very transparent with you. It just went away because you say, hey, we need to connect with our associates. It doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. Just run the town hall. And so we've been doing this weekly, and it's now kind of just, and it's real simple. We don't worry as much about it. And it's now built into our operating cadence. So I think now I'm going to get back to what I was mentioning earlier about the fun things. And these kind of just started to happen organically.
Yeah.
Because, man, I think we all need a little bit of fun in our lives these days, right? So we hired a Broadway singer and dancer, of all things, to teach us a dance routine, as a part of these virtual get-togethers. So for 10 minutes at a number of these virtual get-togethers, I ask everybody, let's get out of our chairs, stretch, and this incredible individual just basically takes us through a fun song and dance routine for 10 minutes, and we all have a lot of fun with it. We see each other on video, right? So it's just rib each other about who's a great dancer, who's not, this sorts of things. We just recently did something else. We had our first event yesterday. It was a drop-in on one of our virtual get-togethers. I just hired a comedian. I used an agency. It really kind of, we needed to laugh. Laughter is just one of the best parts of life, right? So we hired a comedian, and he did a great 10-minute routine for us. And so, we just got incredible responses on these little things like that. And we're going to continue. I suspect we're going to probably continue these if we ever get to a new normal, right? I am going to ask you and your listeners, if any of you know of an art historian, please reach out to me. I'd love to add a 10-minute discussion about a couple of famous paintings and select a different number of paintings each time. So if any of you are an art historian and know of one that wants to do a little bit of part-time work, please reach out to me.
So You've talked about your leadership style and advice, or the qualities that you think that make a good leader. Do you have any advice for those that are aspiring to be leaders and future CEOs, possibly?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, I guess maybe three simple things. One, be yourself. Aspire. Yeah, you have to aspire, right?
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'll go back to that thing which I'm so preoccupied by. It's you have to develop a tolerance for ambiguity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great. So on a more personal note, you and Dick Easom, you share an interesting passion surrounding typography. Can you tell us a little bit about what fascinates you about this topic and what originally sparked your interest in it?
There was a book. There's two versions of the book. I think it was published by Peach Pit Press, and the book's title was "The PC is not a typewriter," and I think there's a similar one that basically was titled "The Mac is not a typewriter." So, that book, it's maybe 20, 25, maybe even 30-year-old book. But what the book, it was a really simple book, maybe no more than, I don't know, 30, 40 pages. It was a thin book. So it was a really easy read. But it really kind of, for whatever reason, it just, ignited a spark. So you remember, it really kind of helped bring to light that, and this is just when what you see is what you get type software was coming online on our old Windows machines, right, and Macintosh machines. So it's about essentially desktop publishing, but in a much more simplistic way than LaTeX or other more professional programs at that point in time was doing. And it was really kind of helped understand, like, you don't use two spaces when you're doing when you're preparing a Word document, for example, right? And it talked about single spacing, double spacing, fractional spacing, talked about kerning of fonts, those sorts of things. And it was all about how typewriters, one of the biggest revolution that occurred in typesetting essentially was when IBM came out with the Selectric typewriter. They had that golf ball. And they had fractional line spacing. They had all those things, superscripts, real superscripts, subscripts, or at least pseudo superscripts, subscripts. So anyway, I was fascinated. And even to this day, I will still call out to the folks who work with me when they've hit two spaces after a period in Word. So it was really that book, and it was an old Adobe software program that was called PageMaker. Simple to use, but it really kind of gave you introductory desktop publishing capabilities. So anyway, those two things really kind of sparked my interest. I just kind of kept that interest alive all those years. I just finished reading, as you mentioned in the introduction, this book by Simon Garfield. It was actually published. I don't know how I missed it. It was published a number of years ago, but it's an incredible read. It's a fun read. It's not a technical book, and it's called Just My Type, right? And it's just really interesting history of some of the typefaces. Did you know that Steve Jobs? Everyone knows who Steve Jobs is, right?
Yeah.
He one of the things he learned, I guess, during his college years, was calligraphy. And you might remember the old Macs, the Apples that came out, which had these unique typefaces that were named by cities: New York, Chicago, Venice, Los Angeles. It's kind of an odd thing. And those typefaces actually kind of, to some degree, resembled a little bit about those cities in some ways. And so those were designed by Steve Jobs.
Oh, wow. Very interesting stuff. So this may make me seem older than I really am, but the whole two spaces after periods was a norm for me throughout my college career. And it wasn't until I was teaching at college, the English level, that my students were like, "Miss Kays, you don't do two spaces." I had to look it up.
Well, I think, unfortunately, now we're going to really get nerdy, right? APA and is it MOA? Yeah, and MOA, right? The two standard
Yeah.
style guys, right? I think they still, maybe even to this day, still have two spaces after a period for some reason in their thesis. Style guy.
Oh, interesting. They need to get with the times, right?
They do, yeah.
All right. So we've delved into your nerdy side a little bit and we've learned a little bit about you, but are there 3 things that many people might not know about you?
Oh, okay. So this might be a little bit embarrassing. I suspect it was meant to be a little bit embarrassing, right?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So let's see if I can do this chronologically. And these are just, all right. So I think the first is while I was in high school, I was ranked second in doubles in Pennsylvania. And there's actually a funny story about that, which I don't tell very often. My tennis partner and I we were definitely the underdog, and this was like the final match, right? In this, we're to become the second place. I guess we were third place. Sorry, we were ranked third, and so we were definitely the underdog. The other team underestimated us, so we were basically got down to match point in our favor. It was a long game, and so we decided to do something different. In this last game, I was serving, and I don't know if you or your listeners know Australian style doubles. And maybe it's totally made up. I don't know, but when your partner at the net straddles the service line between the two service boxes, can you visualize that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and when you do this, that net man or person has to really crouch low so not to get hit by the server, right? Because you usually try to serve down the middle or in one of the corners of the box. So I had a pretty wicked serve at that time. This is a long time ago. But also many times it was also out of control. So I was one of those players that had really tried to put everything into the first serve, and then the second serve was frankly just a cakewalk, okay, for the other team. So we were at match point. I just let one go, and it smacked my partner square on his back, and he just immediately went down.
Oh, no.
The ball flew over the fence behind the other team, and he was down for at least a few minutes. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt. We got him back up, and started. We were ready to play again. The opposing team actually just had no clue how to react to this, other than frankly just laughing. They just couldn't stop laughing. They might have had a little bit of fear. I don't know, but at least thinking. So I lobbed a really easy second serve, and they were just laughing so hard that they just flubbed it, and we ended up winning.
Oh, that's an amazing story.
Yeah. So if my partner out there is still out there and listening, cheers to you. All right. So you asked for 3 things, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Oh gosh. Okay. This will really be embarrassing. The second one I'll mention is I read the American Dictionary twice in my lifetime.
Wow.
Okay, yeah. So the first time was I think I was I was in college. It was summer. And I was a bit bored, and I needed to study for the GMATs. I don't know if they still give the GMAT exams out if you want to go to business school, I was one of those types of person. I just had a hard time figuring out how to study for it. So I decided, well, my weakness is those Miller analogy tests. I don't know if you are familiar with those, but and they used to give those in the GMATs back then. So I thought, well, the best way to fix that weakness was to actually learn more and more words. And so I read the dictionary for the first time this summer. Now, the second time is even a more embarrassing story. I read it just for fun about 10 years after that. And now I will give some. So I tried reading the Oxford English Dictionary once, and I just couldn't get through it. I could not. I think I was in alpha. There's no way I could get through Z. And so, but if any of your listeners are interested in reading the dictionary and you're on the American side, right, of the Atlantic, I really highly recommend the American Heritage Dictionary, paperback version. It's got pictures in it. It's an easy read. It's actually kind of a fun read.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard someone say that about the dictionary.
Okay. Well, there's the first time for everything.
Absolutely.
All right. The third thing is, all right, this goes from like a little bit embarrassing to definitely embarrassing to really embarrassing. So as I've been getting closer and closer to think about what I want to do when I finally retire, I've been making a list of what I'm going to choose as my next career. And I've been having some fun with this with my wife. The list is really long. It's probably got about 40 or 50 things on it. And almost all of the choices are totally impractical, which is actually what makes the list fun, right? And so examples are like being a rock star to being a detective on a Caribbean island. And so another one on that list is, and this actually is not so impractical, is writing a book on the history of butter by traveling around the world. So, butter's made differently and tastes differently around the world. And I thought it would be a fascinating thing to do. And butter, goes all the way back, 10,000 years maybe, when we've learned how to domesticate animals. So anyway, this third thing is I've had this long list of things which I like to consider doing when I retire from SMA.
Oh, those are amazing. Thank you for sharing those with us, AJ.
You're welcome.
Thanks, AJ. I think we have what we call a surprise rapid fire question. Normally we have a feel for the guest, and then we normally pick the questions. In your case, actually, we don't know where we start, but let's have a go. So you mentioned about few books, all the way from the typo books to Adobe PageMaker to the recent American Dictionary. What's your all-time favorite book, Ajay?
It's actually a children's book. And it's by a British author. So one of the things that we've loved, my wife and I have loved doing, is we used to read to our daughter constantly. And thankfully she's picked up a love of reading. And I don't remember the name of the book. I apologize. But every other aspect of the book I totally can visualize. It's by Enid Blyton. And I may not be pronouncing her the name correctly. And it was a children's book, just full of really odd, cute, interesting stories. One of them about being a pot man. So anyway, and pot not in terms of the modern connotation of pot, but in terms of pots and pans.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to find the title of that book. That's a very odd book to let your listeners know is my favorite book, but it really actually is. And I don't know if either of you know this author.
No, I think my kids might know.
Yeah. She's a very popular author, I think, children's author in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Maybe Northern Europe, but Enid Blyton. Another one is what is it? By Julie Andrews. The Broadway star. What was it? It was the Whangdoodle. The amazing Whangdoodle. That's incredible. So anyway, it's maybe tells a lot about myself, but my favorite memorable books are actually children's books.
That's brilliant. I think that tells a lot about why you are. What's the right word, Jay? I mean, your laugh is very, very childish.
Okay, so there's a story that goes along with that. So, in college, right? Every college they have they show films, right, to the students, right, as a kind of like Friday evening, Saturday things to keep students on campus. And so people knew which movies I went to because of my laughter.
That's interesting. See, I'm getting there, Ajay. I'm getting there.
You are.
So Ajay, let's touch a little bit about the typo. So what's your favorite font and your least favorite font?
Oh, wow. Okay. I would say my favorite font, it's a classic, it's Palatino.
Mhm.
I think it's a Mercanthaler type foundry. So Palatino is just a really nice, classic, very readable font. It's been around for a long time. I think maybe 1950s or so. It's I think, a more readable version and more aesthetically pleasing than like Times New Roman or Castellan or some of the other scripted serif fonts. I like to use that font in my memos and things like that. It also tends to, I think, respond better when you're trying to fit a certain amount of text in a certain physical space on the page. So it kerns more nicely than other fonts. Let's see, least favorite font. I've seen a lot of bad ones. I think we've all seen a lot of bad ones. There's some which have really kind of gotten the brunt of folks who kind of, have some interest in this. Comic Sans is one. It was actually it was created, I think, by a Microsoft individual as part of a Microsoft program, and it became overused. Let's see, another one. Okay, here's one. Cooper Black, used in a lot of the Beatles albums and posters. It's just, for whatever reason, it just never really appealed to me. Fonts are very iconic with certain things. I'm going to digress now. Futura font was, I think, invented by a German foundry or individual. It's used in a lot of industrial applications. If you look at consumer packaging or signage on the side of a van or building, you notice, if you look closely, you'll notice a lot of it uses the Futura font. It's overused. Gills San is iconically British. It's actually a really good font, but the individual who created it is a really odd, not a particularly nice person. At least if you read Simon Garfield's book, you'll discover a lot of things which you probably didn't want to know about other people who were in this business.
I know you travel a lot, Ajay. What's the first thing you do when you come back home after a long business trip?
Let's see. Okay. Usually I get home late. Occasionally my wife is still up and waiting. But if she's not, I'll typically essentially put my computer away, plug it in, because usually it's run down on the battery. I will look what's in the fridge, grab a quick snack, and frankly, just get to bed as quickly as I can. I think sometimes I'm sufficiently obsessive to actually unpack.
Right. Perfect. So when you're having a bad day, what do you do to make yourself feel better?
I enjoy sharing meals with other people. I really enjoy kind of bonding over meals. And so I'll say, hey, you doing anything for lunch? If not, let's go grab some lunch.
Good. So on the other side, what do you cook better than anybody else?
Oh, okay. And I can't say hard-boiled eggs or buttered toast. Oh, that's a hard one. I cook, at least I think my wife will tell me this, whether or not it's what I would call marriage politeness or not, but I cook a pretty good steak, I think.
That's good. That's a tough one. What are your favorite pizza toppings?
Oh, I like my pizzas very, very simple. It's always the same. It's easy on the cheese, very thin crust, fresh tomatoes, and fresh onions.
That's good. So following with the food, if you could eat only 3 food for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Definitely pizza is one. I would say another is I love a really good cooked steak. And I say a third. Wow. Okay. This is okay. So it's a toss up between toss up between 3 things. And this is weird for me to say, but it's a toss up between lemons, onions, and radishes.
That's good. You have a nice balanced diet there, Ajay.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Great. So if you could be anywhere else right now, where would you go?
Right now, this very moment.
Mhm.
Oh, I would go to somewhere where it's incredibly sunny and warm. Zihuatanejo, Mexico would be a wonderful place. My family vacations there every year. We had to cancel our we had an extra trip planned in early May. We had to cancel that recently, so I'm particularly missing that right now. But it's a beautiful small fishing village in Mexico, about 2/3 down the Pacific coast of Mexico.
Have you ever sent a message to a wrong person?
All the time. All the time. This is the problem with email and autocomplete on Outlook.
Interesting.
So we have a number of Gregs in our business and a number of people whose first name starts with J. And fairly frequently it goes to the wrong person. And, you know, they're aware of it, say, hey, I think you meant the other J or the other Greg.
Perfect. So if you are a superhero, which of your friends would you pick as your sidekick and what your respective powers be?
I would have to pick my family, my wife and my daughter. Because a superhero family's got to be a family. Otherwise, it'd be really strange to your spouse or child, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're a child to your parent. What would my powers be? I am sometimes accused of not knowing what other people are thinking because I'm sometimes not a great listener. So I would have to say it's knowing what other people are thinking. Now that seems like an odd power, but I think there's some superheroes that probably actually have that power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the rest of your family, Ajay?
Oh, well, my wife is an incredibly dynamic person. She tries to bring a lot of joy to others. Her power would be by zapping somebody, making them feel happy. How about that? And my daughter, okay. Her superpower would be predicting the future.
Oh, wow. Okay. That will be very interesting combination because you will know everything that your wife and your daughter thinks about you because you and your daughter will know everything about the future. But at the end of the day, your wife will be happy regardless of what happens. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I guess at some point I would have to. I guess if you're a superhero, you got to know when to turn off your power, right, to make it work.
Exactly. That's great. That's great. So. I think I might know the answer, but I would ask you anyway. If you could be an Olympic athlete, in what sport would you compete?
Okay, if you asked that question a year ago, it'd be different, or 10 years ago, it'd probably be different. Cycling. I've recently picked up cycling as a activity to do with my wife and my larger family. My brother-in-laws really enjoy cycling. And so we've been doing these week and a half, 500-mile type cycling trips in different parts of the world. And been really enjoying that. So I'm not a great cyclist. I hate hills. That says it all, right? But I really have enjoyed picking that up again.
Oh, that's great. I mean, like because we talked about typos. Ajay, do you like your handwriting?
No. I have two types of handwriting. Really indecipherable handwriting, which typically finds its way on a whiteboard for other folks to try to decipher. And the other is when I do take some time to write more legibly, it's in a rapid printed form instead of script.
Just interesting.
I do not have pretty handwriting.
I can imagine. So, okay. So if you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume that you had done?
Probably driven 160 miles per hour down the road.
That sounds about right. Perfect. If your 5-year-old suddenly found himself inhabiting in your current body, what would your 5-year-old self will do first?
Oh, when I was 5. Go out to the yard and play with a ball, any type of ball, tennis ball, child's ball, you name it. I just enjoyed being out in the yard, playing with a ball, hitting against the wall, trying to catch it, whatever you want to, whatever way in which you can self-entertain yourself with a ball.
That's interesting. Considering you are still a 5-year-old now in the body, what cartoon character would he like to be for a week?
Be between one of two things. Either be one of the characters in SpongeBob, or one of the characters in the Bugs Bunny type series with Coyote Wile E. Coyote. It'd be either would be, which character in SpongeBob? Wouldn't it be SpongeBob? Who's the character that runs the restaurant in SpongeBob? It's a crab, right?
Is it Ashley?
I think it's a crab.
Yeah, the only thing I know about the crab are the Krabby Patties, because I loved those.
Yes, I was totally fascinated by that children's cartoon. So it'd either be that or it would be Wile E. Coyote.
Oh, perfect. So the last two, what's the most courageous thing you have ever done in your life, Ajay?
I would say it was with my wife raising our child. Takes a tremendous amount of courage to raise children.
Yes, I'm sure every single listener will agree with that. I'm actually kind of praying that my kids don't open the door and come and scream when we are recording.
Yes.
So the last one. What would you do if you are the last person on this earth?
Oh, the very last person. Wow. I would probably write the history of butter in some form, some memorable form, which like carve it in stone or something. No, I would probably write something in some permanent fashion about mankind, about what it was like to be a human.
Oh, perfect. So I thought you would write about the typos. That's brilliant. Thank you, Ajay. So,
well, I would probably use a really interesting typeface.
Yeah. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Ajay, what's the biggest lesson life has taught you?
Oh, that's easy. Admit to your mistakes.
That's amazing. Yes. Now looking back at your career and the beautiful family and everything around you, who are you most grateful for in your life and career?
Wow. Okay. So I will obviously first start with my family, right? My wife, daughter. It's been an incredible life in terms of my marriage and raising our daughter. I think I've had the really good fortune of working for some really interesting and just amazing people. My career started in aerospace defense at TRW. I was just fortunate to have a boss. His name was Dr. Chuck Wooler. He taught me how to truly be a professional, which is really important when your first job, real job, right?
Mm.
And also taught me how to write. I mean, I can't tell you how many times he had asked me to come into his office and go through endless revisions and revisions on memos. Steve Myers, the namesake of SMA,
Mm-hmm.
taught me about focus and competitive thinking, integrity and logical thinking, but most of all, discipline. Discipline in how you conducted yourself and your principles. He was a difficult person to work for, but I learned a lot from him. I'd say Joe and Mark Fuller at the Monitor Group, just incredible. They were two of the 5 founders, just wonderful, incredibly smart, and just humanistic bosses. And I'd say today, current time, the directors I have on my board of directors, they're just all incredibly experienced and insightful leaders. And I can't thank them enough for being so supportive of what we've done with the company these past, since 2013. So those are the folks, I guess I've been just kind of in a rapid fire fashion, I've been really grateful for.
Oh, thank you, Jay. I'm sure you're blessed in so many fashions here. So the last question from me, Ajay, what have you observed lately that reminded you that people are good?
Wow. Okay. So this is a particularly interesting question in the current time, right, of the coronavirus epidemic. I think, first of all, and we read about this in papers, right, around the world. I hope, I think we all have to just greatly admire those people who we in the U.S. call are on the front line. I think you do the same in the U.K. Those folks who are in the healthcare industry, you hear more and more about nurses, healthcare practitioners, doctors coming down with the virus, right? They're just so incredibly valued in terms of what they're doing. We should all admire them for what they're doing. I think also just as equally important are those everyday things that the everyday person does, the small things for their neighbors. As you hear stories about that. I see it in our neighborhood in terms of folks, shopping for a neighbor who's elderly and really shouldn't get out of their home. Even to kind of simple things like, someone has to go to the office to pick up the mail, right?
Yep.
And so people who, immediately, instinctively, you all get in front of the elevator and, I think it's an act of kindness for people to step back and say, hey, why don't you take the elevator yourself? And so I think, I think we're seeing it, a lot of this acts of kindness today. It may not be so manifest, obviously, but it's there. I think we're all seeing it when you go for the few times you should go grocery shopping. You see really people observing, social distancing, things like that. I think those are acts of kindness because those aren't things that we normally are used to doing.
Beautifully said, Ajay. Beautifully said. Thank you.
So AJ, we're down to our final 3 questions.
Okay.
You told us about a really interesting start to, college life, skipping your last senior year of high school, and then, entering into the field through the sciences and going into the business development arena from there. If you could give your younger self any piece of advice, what would it be?
One, don't take yourself so seriously. 2, put yourself out more. I was perhaps on the shy side when I was much younger, just make a more deliberate effort to network, to meet new people. Those are probably the 2 things which I would have advised myself looking backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of our listeners, and especially our younger listeners, will be able to learn a lot from those pieces of advice to your younger self. So which accomplishments over the years are you the most proud of?
Oh, well, okay. The most proud of, I would say it's how my wife and I instilled a love of reading in our daughter. and also not just our daughter, but others. And so
Yeah.
our daughter's friends, anyone that we came in touch with, I think reading is just an incredible thing. And people have, a lot of folks in today's age didn't acquire that love. And I think a lot of it's because of how folks are taught when they're younger. Even, a simple thing as reading a newspaper, I think is just an incredible thing to do every day. So I think it's about, actually, at least personally, in terms of what we've done, and it's just over time, our daughter has kind of had that same love of reading as both my wife and I have.
That's amazing. That love of reading is such a wonderful gift to pass along to your daughter and to her friends and anybody that you could really influence. Such a critical skill. So our last question is, what's something that you're looking forward to in the future?
Okay. All right. Okay. I would say it's a simple thing. It's sharing a meal with colleagues, friends, and family sitting within 6 feet of each other. Oh, and if you really talk about the future, becoming a detective on a warm, sunny Caribbean island. How about that?
Those are amazing.
Yes, such a warm memories that you have shared in this, all the way from writing a butter book to being, that Russian story to the martial arts, the amazing, and then reading passion, typography, family, running the largest capture stroke proposal consulting company in the world. You made it sound so simple, Ajay. Thank you so much, Ajay, for your time today. It's really been a privilege to have you with us at Scribble Talk. Wish you and family and friends and colleagues, everybody, all the good health and happiness. Please continue to inspire bid and proposal community and everybody around you. Thank you so much, Ajay.
Well, thank you, Bhaskar and Ashley. And I've really very much enjoyed this, and the same wishes for you and your families and colleagues as well.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit batchyscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Bhaskar Sundram,
signing off.